So I'm sitting here in my niece Neva's living room, and Geneva is like I can't. I'm just a big fan of Geneva. Um, I can't. Sometimes I just like blown away that she's my niece. She's a most impressive thing is she's a mother, single mother of four beautiful kids. She's a midwife, a doula, uh, yoga instructor, um,
Many things.
many things. um, it's like womb warrior, right? Birth rights, uh, birth justice advocate,
Yep.
social justice, racial advocate and fighter. Um, she's a lot. So, Neva, did I miss anything there?
I mean, I don't even know all the things I do sometimes. It's hard to keep it track, but I think you hit the big ones.
um, so, like, just being a mother, single mother of four kids, I mean, that would be enough for a lot of people. Why did you take the path you took? Why are you like a womb warrior and a midwife and a fighter for social justice and all that? Why?
um, it's a great question. I I don't know. I often have no idea how I got where I am, and I just sort of feel like I was like pushed along this path. Like when people ask me, why I became a midwife, I'm like, that's how. Why did I become a midwife? Like I never remember like a moment where I was like, I think I'm gonna be a midwife. Like, um, I mean, my degree, as you know, is in foreign languages, and I I think I've always just had like a passion for people and like really learning about people. Like I lived in Austria, and that was such an amazing experience. Like really getting to live with another family and see how they work, and going to a school for a year in Austria and having best friends there, and just like getting to live this whole other life. Um, and and I really felt like speaking the language, like speaking German while I was there, like helped me like not just be a tourist, but helped me like be a part of their culture, a part of their family. And so I just like kind of really fell in love with languages and never wanted to come back to America again. And but they made me come back. And then I got really involved with the church, and like that was a whole language too, like the language of Christ and of
The church in Austria? Or
no, the
here?
church here, yeah, Christian church. Like before I went to Austria, I really was never interested in Christianity or religion really at all. Um, but uh, since I don't know, I didn't want to be in America, and so I was like trying to stay away from anybody that I knew, and I somehow ended up in a church. This was like then it was like a whole new culture for me to explore, like this culture of the religion of Christianity, and the people who this is what they live and die for, and like it was so beautiful too of just like this again this new family and being a part of this culture, and within that culture I got to go to Russia 4 times, and that was really beautiful, and got to learn all about that culture. And so, yeah, I think it all just sort of started with a love for people and really like getting to know them on a level that I don't think um, I don't think in our normal American culture we have the opportunity to really like get to know people on this really deep level, unless we set about really intentionally to do it. And after I had my first baby, I was like, huh, that was cool. I could like maybe do some work in this. Like, you know, I had thought before I had my first live that I would be traveling the world. And then when I got pregnant, unexpectedly, like that plan ended because I now had this baby to care for. And I mean, I guess I could have traveled the world with him, but that didn't seem like the right thing to do at the time. It felt more like, you know, settling in and letting him be the center of the world for a while was the right thing to do. And so I just kind of put it on the back burner. I didn't know anything about midwives or doulas or birth advocacy or anything like that at that time. I just knew that like I had a pretty cool experience. I felt powerful giving birth, and I had never heard anybody say anything like that before. But I knew you could be a doctor or you could be a nurse, and I didn't want to go back to college. I had just graduated from college, and so I just didn't really think much more about it. I did my stepdad's bookkeeping. And then when I got pregnant with Dre is when I learned about like doulas and midwives and stuff. And I was like, oh, now that I could do. Like, it's all, you know, self-study, weekend certifications. Like, it felt really attainable. And like I could make an impact on other young moms. And, you know, being a mom is so isolating. Like when you just are home with this baby. And it was a way for me to connect with other moms. And for me not to feel alone. And I don't know, I think most people like really feel better when they're giving back. And I guess I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it felt like a way to give to myself as a new mom by giving back to other moms and like showing them a different way and showing them that their birth, their postpartum time, their time with their new babies could be something powerful instead of something that's just like a day to be gotten through or, you know, this, I don't know, we just have a different idea in our minds of what birth and what like having a new baby are going to look like than what they actually look like. And so then I fell in love with the whole birth culture and like I get to again and again be like in this intimate relationship with people. And some people I'm just in an intimate relationship with them for a few months, and some is much deeper, and we're still, you know, close friends years later, and I get to have many babies with them, and I'm part of their family and they're part of mine. And so it's just this really beautiful way to have relationships.
And you wrote a book about like the birth culture and having, you know, empowerment of women having babies and stuff, and it really opened up my eyes to like, this is something that like we don't even talk about or think about it. Babies just happen and behind closed doors, and they just happen, and then life goes on. And
yeah, and that's true. But I think any woman, if like, you know, you're doing all these interviews, if you ask any woman who has kids what her birth was like, she remembers like vividly. And I mean, you had a kid. I've asked you about your birth experience, and you remember. Yeah. And it was a huge impact on your life and your relationship with Rolina, and like.
Yeah, it was huge. Mm-hmm. But it's something like we don't talk about at dinner.
No, I mean, unless you're me.
Right.
Or anybody I hang out with, that's like all we talk about. Let's talk more about placentas.
So you've had an interesting time growing up. You grew up partly in a small town in Colorado and partly here. You've had several father figures, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any reflections or anything? What was growing up like for you?
It's interesting. I reflect more on it the older I get, of just like the interesting, like I grew up in Hayden, Colorado, and I during the pandemic I took Dre and his best friend and my best friend we actually went to Utah for a trip, but we drove back through Hayden to like show them where I lived. And I was like, man, I forgot I never realized how beautiful this area is, you know, like you just don't appreciate that kind of stuff when you're a kid. And like growing up skiing and just being able to be outside and, run around in the streets. And even like when I moved to Denver and we lived in the same house on Kansas Drive, like those times, and like, all the neighborhood kids would go out and play hide and seek every night, and just such a different time than what kids are growing up in now. And it's crazy how different it is for my kids. Like when my older two, who are 22 and 19 now, like our neighbors used to yell at us for letting them play outside in the front. Like, and I'd be like, wait, I'm getting yelled at for letting my kids play outside. Okay. But yeah, it was beautiful being able, my dad is such a nature guy, and just all the camping, and, I have such great memories of being around a campfire and singing songs, and just those really beautiful, like, to me, that's like what a real like family experience is, And then on the other side, my mom is really not a nature person. I mean, not that she doesn't like nature, but she's much more of a, not really a homebody, but just like, she's more of an, I guess, I was going to say intellectual, but my dad's very much an intellectual. But she's, the things that she was passionate about were more work and, books and, things like, I guess, things that your family instilled in her more, which, family happened more inside your house than it did outside in nature.
Yeah.
And that was also beautiful. Like, I have such great memories of our monthly family birthday parties. And like, I think that was such a great opportunity as a kid to just really be around family, that my kids don't have that really at all. I'm like really trying to have a monthly family thing now that two of my kids have moved out, and it's like so hard to find a time that everybody can get over here once a month, but like it was so important to grandma and grandpa, and they made it happen, and everybody knew, like, you couldn't miss the birthday of the month club.
Yeah, we used to get together so much, it like was like, oh no, we got to get together again.
I know.
And now it's like, dang, we never get together.
I know. Maybe once a year, or if my mom's in town.
Yeah.
And even then, it's not everybody usually.
Yeah. It's different. Yeah. So I just want to know, you're like a spiritual seeker. I've always seen you as that, and you've traveled the world, learning about religion and faith and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What have you learned?
Oh my gosh, so little. I'm not exactly sure what I'm seeking, but there's definitely something within me that like yearns to know like why we're here and what this life is about. And I mean, I think the answer is really easy, and it's like self-knowledge and love, like knowing yourself, loving yourself, and through that being able to like know and love others. But it feels so much harder than that. Yeah. And so yeah, I just find it really fascinating. Like, I've been to India, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Guatemala. I've studied all of the Egyptian mythology, yoga and Ayurveda, and I'm now studying the Mayan cosmology. And like, what's really beautiful is the similarities. Obviously, I've studied Christianity for many years. I talked about that already. And just the similarities between everything, like going to Egypt and seeing the same stories that, seeing the same stories that are told in the Bible, that are told in the Quran, that are, they're not really written down in the Mayan cosmology, but handed down, that like every single culture has a flood story. Every single culture has like a creation story. And just like being curious about like what really happened, and like how we all got so separated through these same stories. Like, they're the same stories. Why are we so separated? So yeah, I mean, I think like finding those threads has been really fascinating to me, and trying to find a way to guess, in myself bring it all together so that I can help other people bring it together, if that even is. I don't know. I don't even know if it's about other people, but there's something within me that isn't whole yet that I'm trying to find the pieces to, you know?
Yeah. And you're a yoga instructor, right?
Yeah, I haven't really taught since the pandemic. The last class I taught was like March 6th or something like that of 2020, you know? It was like the place I was teaching couldn't teach anymore, so I recorded some videos and for a while, and then I just was, I don't know. The pandemic was, you know, for most people, it was a time of quiet and introspection and being able to stay home. And for home birth midwives, it was not. It was like really overnight. Home birth wasn't a crazy idea anymore because people didn't want to go to the hospital during the pandemic. And so we all, like literally in Denver, the rate of home birth doubled. But the number of midwives didn't. So we all have just got super busy, and those numbers haven't gone down since then. So I feel like I've been like scrambling ever since March of 2020.
And that's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean,
Totally.
a lot of people are like finding out about home births and stuff, but that means a lot more work for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. I've had lots of great experiences, and it's been really hard, you know, like you said, as a single mom. Like, I have a partner that is living with me now, and that's something I haven't had in 10 or 11 years of having, you know, someone who can help pick my kids up from school or cook dinner, or, you know, I guess Uber Eats cooks dinner a lot, but but yeah, it's all been really challenging. And I always wonder kind of, you know, what it must be like to be the kid of a birth worker where like my kids just, they're like not phased at all. If I'm like, oh, I'm, you know, last week were parent teacher conferences, they're like, are you coming? I'm like, no, I'm at a birth. So they're like, okay, I'll let my teachers know. Like, just doesn't even faze them. They're like, oh, she's at a birth, you know. Is mom here this morning? No, she's at a birth. Like, who's picking us up for school? They just like roll with it, you know. So I hope that they're not totally traumatized in the end. And it's a funny profession because, like, on the one hand, I get to be really more available for my kids, like to be like, you know, I'm available if they need me to pick them up during the day or have appointments, or when they were little, I could, you know, volunteer at the school and things like that. And I never know if I'm going to show up or not. So, yeah. It's, like I said, it's an interesting thing because I got into it because I thought I could be home with my family more with this kind of job. And, like, in a very real sense, my work comes before my family, you know? Like, I can't be like, oh, sorry, I can't come to your birth right at this minute. Can I come in 4 hours? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I said, hopefully they're not too traumatized.
I don't know. They seem like pretty healthy kids to me. Like you've done a great job.
Thank you.
So I mean, life is hard, man. When you look around, like look at the things going on, how divided we are, and you know, and the environment's a mess, and there's, you know, and people are struggling financially, and there's a lot of racial unrest. And what gives you hope? What keeps you going? What gets you up in the morning and gets you through the day?
Oh man, I mostly just try not to think about anything. When I really think about all those things, it can just feel so overwhelming. And like, what can we actually do? What is there actually hope about? You know, it just doesn't seem to be ending. But the small differences, I guess, that we can make are what gets me out of bed. Like, I guess that's one thing about being a mom. You know, you can't fix the world, but you can fix breakfast for your kids, and they'll remember that, or they'll really remember what they don't necessarily remember if you do fix the breakfast, but they really do remember if you don't. And you know, one of the things in my spiritual studies that I have learned and that I really believe is that, like, the only thing we really have control over is ourselves, but that, like, if we can heal ourselves, heal our own childhood wounds, that through that we can heal our parents and our grandparents and our children and our grandchildren. And so really the work is about how can I be the best version of myself today.
Wow.
And hope that trickles on out, you know.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think you're right. And something that gives me hope just quickly here is like your kids. I mean, just seeing how beautiful they are, and that's the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my oldest, as you know, just got married, and I thought it was just so beautiful seeing how Liv and Lavender love each other, and just unapologetically, and they're unapologetically themselves. And that's, you know, I have lots of things that I regret through mothering my kids, and, you know, the things I know I could have done better, but like something I also believe in, written in my book, if anybody wants to read my book, Wisdom from the Womb, the Magic of a Baby-Led Birth. But that, like, you know, these babies come into the world with a plan, you know, like, as they're still spirit beings, that they are coming to learn certain lessons in this lifetime, that we each chose to come into this lifetime to learn certain things, and that we actually choose our parents to inflict our childhood wounds that we will then heal from, which are the life lessons we came for. So maybe I just think that to make myself feel better, that my kids chose me, that they wanted me to wound them in the way that I did, you know. But what was so beautiful, you know, what I can say with each one of my kids is that they are their own person. Like, my kids are not afraid to just be themselves. And I think that is one of my great successes in life, is that my kids aren't afraid to be themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, seeing that at Liv and Lavender's wedding, of just how much they love each other and are learning to love themselves, and are just okay with who they are. You know, Liv and Lavender, they're young. They're 22 and 24, I think. They've been together since 2019, and they've never had a fight. I'm like, are you sure you're my kid? But yeah, like you said, that, like, these kids are learning a different way. Like, they're learning to communicate in a different way, and to accept each other in a different way, I think, than what I was taught or you were taught. So it's really beautiful.
It is. And it's so much more open than like my upbringing and my outlooks when I was a younger person.
And you're really open-minded. I mean, as I know you, but I didn't know you when you were 22, so.
Yeah, I kind of have my head in my butt. But any other, like what would you tell Geneva, like a 16-year-old Geneva, if you were to run into her?
Oh, geez. Have more fun. I mean, that's one of the things I think about a lot, like, in our family, is this, like, workaholism. Like, you know, my mom is a workaholic. She's retired and still works, like, I don't know how many hours a week. And Grandpa, I don't know how many jobs Grandpa retired from, but he always worked. And, you know, from what I've gleaned from the, you know, the few stories I've heard from you and Danny and my mom in your childhood, is that, like, he wasn't really ever there. He was just working all the time. And you know, I try to think back on my childhood, and the main thing I remember was my mom working, and even my dad. Like, my dad works in a different way, but really likes to work. And, you know, I work all the time. And part of it is because I like it. But then I'm like, where is that balance of like, we don't have to work to be valuable? And, you know, what it's great to work hard and accomplish the things that you want to in your lifetime. But like, what are you really going to remember at the end? And I do think that my work is such that like I will feel good and remember, but I don't want to miss out on the fun in the meantime. And I got to remind myself of that a lot. So that's what I'd probably say to 16-year-old. I mean, 16-year-old Geneva was having a lot of fun, but was also working really hard.
Yeah.
You know, I was a very good student and always had a job since I was like 12 years old. And but that's, you know, that in our family, that is what we were taught to do.
And you were a serious kid.
Yeah.
Very serious.
I've always been a very serious person. Yeah.
Just one more question, and we've already covered a lot of this, but this is a question I ask every parent that I interview is, what has your kids taught you?
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
What have you learned from your children?
Everything. I think definitely a lot of just humility, of not knowing really anything, and you know, some grace for my own parents and their own parents and everybody. I think I honestly haven't learned this yet. But like, that just doing your best is okay. You know, like, there's no way to be a perfect parent. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. And, you know, if your kids are still speaking to you at the end of the day, probably it's okay. But, yeah, I hope I can learn that eventually. That, like, you know, good enough is good enough.
Yeah, knowing something and learning something are two different things,
right? I know now that I don't know a whole lot, and my kids are really good at reminding me that too.
Wow. You just proved you're very wise. Well, Geneva, I just really appreciate this time with you, and just want to take this time to tell you how much I love you and appreciate you.
I love you too. You've been just a huge impact and hero in my life for all the work that you do, and the way that you show up in your community and in the world, and as another father figure to me. You know, I had my dad and my stepdad, and now my new stepdad, but like, you and Danny were really huge father figures to me too. So thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you.
That's good, Neva. Thank you.